When did this happen? Well, we looked into them and found the answers for you tonight. Big surprise. It started in the 1960s. Los Angeles riots broke out. They decided the best way to deal with them would be through military force, but you can't have a real military. You had to do it through the police force. So they would use an elite group of officers who could use their combat skills on domestic territory and respond to crisis. Well, now in light of the recent uproar in Alaska, where over 70 armed EPA agents descended on an Alaskan mining town, we're learning that at least 40 federal agencies now have armed divisions. 40, including the IRS. There are about 120,000 officers who have guns and can arrest people after they kick down your door. This according to a report from the Justice Department. So how did we move away from you can't do anything like that on domestic soil to your friendly neighborhood office to the IRS having guns? Well, slow and relentless. About the same time, President Nixon began his war on drugs, another progressive. That came along with the no-knock raid, which allowed law enforcement to break down your door without a warrant. So the private SWAT team method came together with the drug war, and it was brought together by the Joint Task Force with secret police officers and soldiers to intervene with the drug trade. Everybody thought it was fine with that. National Guard helicopters, U-2 spy planes were searching for drugs over California, and the DEA and other federal agencies would swoop down from their helicopters. Then the war on terror broke out, and along with it came new rationalizations for militarizing our police. According to the Center for Investigative Reporting, the Department of Homeland Security now has handed out $35 billion to police forces for military gear, such as armored personnel carriers. You've seen these. I've seen them on the backs of trains. In 2011 alone, the Pentagon reached an all-time high when it gave away $500 million to various law enforcement agencies so they could buy higher-powered equipment. Thanks to these forces, our country is now a terror-free and a child-safe zone all over the country. No, it's not. No, it's not. Instead of fighting terror and drug cartels, they're slaughtering college-age football fans and teenagers caught at drinking at bars. And those stories both actually happened recently. It all started in the 1960s. It started to get worse in the 70s and 80s and 90s. But now, under this president, the IRS is training with AR-15s. For what? Beginning in 2010, they requested shotguns for their criminal investigation division, and now they have been granted AR-15s to train with. Those are assault weapons, if you didn't know. Killing people is all they're good for, was what we're told. Does this mean that the government is trying to kill its own citizens? We are witnessing the American police state as bad as we have ever seen it or had it. The Drug Enforcement Agency and the Federal Bureau of Prisons have had guns for years because they deal with actual criminals who shoot people. But why do we have to have the Library of Congress armed? The Federal Reserve Board, why do they have armed officers, SWAT teams? And on Saturday we learned, so does the EPA. A SWAT team? Do you remember Gibson Guitar? It's been a year since they settled, but the Nashville-based guitar maker agreed to pay $300,000 in penalty and forfeit $262,000 in additional claims to the wood seized by federal agencies. I don't think they were ever given an answer to what they did. They were forced to pay another $50,000 to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to promote the conservation of the very precious tree species they irresponsibly used for their instruments, along with a bunch of other people. If they hadn't reached a settlement, the EPA has the military now, so God only knows what the penalty might have been. The question remains this: how come the other guitar manufacturers using the same woods didn't have their doors knocked down? And why does the EPA need a SWAT team? Does it make any sense to you? Unfortunately, it kind of does make sense to me. Because when you have a coalition of ideologues in office who believe the government should be a force of fear rather than a guarantor of liberty, who they believe it's their job to make everything right, everything they think is wrong, through force, That's when you have a country where you don't arm the people on your military bases, but you arm the EPA and the IRS, and everything is in perfect order.